I never thought one sentence could echo inside my head long after it was spoken. It happened so quietly, so unexpectedly that for a moment I wondered if I had even heard her right. She sat closer, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the warmth of her body seeping through the thin air. And then, almost trembling, she whispered the words that still haunt me. "Stay tonight. I don't want to be alone anymore." Her voice wasn't playful. It wasn't casual. It was raw, almost breaking, like the sound of someone who had been holding back too much for too long. And I froze. Every thought inside me collided at once. My mind screamed at me to stand up, to grab my things, to walk out the door before this became something I could never undo. But my body betrayed me. My heart thudded so loud I could barely hear my own reasoning. She wasn't supposed to ask me this. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. But there she was, her eyes holding mine with a weight I couldn't look away from. It wasn't seduction. It wasn't a trap. It was something scarier than both. It was honesty. And that honesty felt heavier than anything I'd carried in years. I told myself to breathe, to say something, anything that would break the silence pressing down on us. But all I could do was sit there, caught between the right thing and the thing I couldn't resist. Her shoulder brushed against mine just barely. A small touch, but it felt like fire racing under my skin. I kept telling myself I should leave, that leaving was the only choice. But the longer I stayed frozen, the more impossible it became. And in that moment, with those words hanging between us, I knew whatever happened next, nothing about us would ever be the same again. She wasn't supposed to be part of my story like this. To everyone else, she was someone stable, respectable, the kind of person who carried herself with quiet strength that nobody ever questioned. People saw her as dependable, unshakable, almost untouchable. But what people don't realize is that those who seem the strongest often carry the heaviest weight in silence. I started noticing little things long before that night. The way she would linger after conversations ended, like she didn't want the moment to be over. The way her laughter came easier when it was just the two of us. Unguarded, softer, different from the polite smile she wore around others. The way she always seemed to find excuses to keep me around. Small tasks, quick chats, nothing that stood out on its own. But when you put it all together, it painted a picture I couldn't ignore. And maybe I should have ignored it. Maybe I should have pretended not to see the cracks forming in her walls. But I didn't, because the truth is I was drawn to them. Drawn to the loneliness that seeped out of her even when she tried so hard to hide it. Started as small moments. A late-night coffee we both laughed about because it was too late to be drinking caffeine. A long talk in the kitchen about things we never admitted to anyone else. A glance that lingered a second too long before either of us looked away. They were small, harmless things until they weren't. That night I hadn't planned on staying long. I had only come by to drop something off, just a simple visit. But when I stepped inside, I noticed how quiet the house felt. Not peaceful quiet, empty quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy, pressing against your ears, making you too aware of your own breathing. She was sitting in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, the glow of a single lamp spilling soft light across her face. She looked tired, not in the way of needing sleep, but in the way of someone who has been carrying too much for too long. Her eyes flicked up when she saw me, and for just a second I caught something there. Relief, like me being there, made the silence less unbearable. We started talking. Nothing serious at first. Small talk about the day, about things that didn't matter. But the more we talked, the more I realized she wasn't trying to fill space with words. She was reaching out. She was letting me in. I sat down across from her, telling myself it was only for a few minutes. But the minutes stretched longer, the conversation deeper. At some point, I noticed the blanket slipping from her shoulder, and she pulled it tighter around herself. Not because she was cold, I could see that, but because it was something to hold on to. Then she shifted, moving from her chair to the couch beside me. At first, she sat with space between us, but slowly, gradually, that space disappeared until I could feel the warmth of her presence. And then came those words that froze me in place. "Stay tonight. I don't want to be alone anymore." I didn't know what to say. My throat went dry. I wanted to ask her what she meant, why she was saying this to me. But the way she looked at me stopped every word before it could leave my lips. Her eyes weren't challenging. They weren't seductive. They were tired, lonely, honest. In that moment, I realized she wasn't asking me for excitement. She wasn't asking me to step into something reckless. She was asking for comfort, for company, for someone to sit in the silence with her, so she didn't have to face it alone. And that's what made it harder, because comfort in its purest form is the most dangerous temptation of all. I could have stood up. I could have smiled politely, made an excuse, and walked out the door, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed sitting there, caught between the weight of her loneliness and the weight of my conscience. The room felt smaller, heavier, like the air itself knew that a line had been drawn, and whichever way I chose, everything after tonight would be different. She leaned in just slightly, her shoulder brushing mine. Not by accident. I felt my entire body tense, my heartbeat quickening. She didn't look at me, though. She just stared ahead, her voice soft as she repeated, almost to herself this time, "I don't want to be alone anymore." And in that instant, I realized this wasn't just about tonight. This was about every night she had spent in silence, every unspoken ache, every unshared burden. She was letting me see the part of her no one else ever saw. And the question clawed at me. Was I strong enough to walk away? Or was I already too far gone? The moment those words left her lips, the world around me seemed to fall into silence. It was as if time had slowed, trapping me in that room with her voice echoing inside my head. "Stay tonight. I don't want to be alone anymore." I couldn't ignore the weight behind them. They weren't just words. They were confessions. And confessions like that aren't spoken unless someone is at their breaking point. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. If I stay, what does that mean? The question repeated over and over in my mind. Staying wasn't simple. Staying wasn't innocent. Staying wasn't something that could be undone. But leaving felt cruel. She turned her head slightly, her eyes finding mine. They were glassy, almost shimmering, but not with tears. At least not yet. It was the kind of look that made you feel like you were the only thing holding someone together. "You don't have to say anything," she whispered again, her voice softer this time. "Just don't go." And there it was, the plea beneath the words. She didn't want explanations. She didn't want promises. She just wanted presence, someone to keep the walls from closing in. I tried to clear my throat, tried to push through the knot of guilt rising in me. Are you sure?" I asked carefully, my words trembling. She nodded once quickly, almost desperately. "Yes." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever known. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the distant tick of the wall clock, the sound of my own pulse drumming in my ears. I shifted on the couch, my mind racing. This isn't right. You know it isn't right. And yet I didn't move to leave. Instead, I stayed. We sat there for a while without speaking, just sharing the silence. But it wasn't the unbearable kind of silence. It was the charged kind, full of things unspoken. My arm brushed against hers once, then again, until finally I stopped trying to pull away. She leaned back into the couch, exhaling a breath that sounded like relief. "Thank you," she murmured. "You don't know how much this means." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word, and it cut straight through me. I wanted to ask her why she felt so alone, why she couldn't find comfort anywhere else. Why me? But the words stuck in my throat. Deep down, I think I already knew the answers. Her hand shifted, resting close to mine. Not touching, not yet, but close enough that all it would take was one tiny movement to bridge the gap. I stared at our hands for what felt like forever, fighting with myself. Every instinct said to move away, to put distance between us, but something stronger kept me frozen. She must have felt it too, because slowly, cautiously, her fingers brushed against mine. The lightest touch barely there. My breath caught. It was nothing, and yet it was everything. I glanced at her, but she wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was fixed ahead, as if pretending that nothing had happened. But her hand stayed close enough that the electricity between us became undeniable. "I don't sleep well anymore," she said suddenly, her voice low. "I lie awake and my thoughts they don't stop. They keep me up, They eat at me. Sometimes I think if I just had someone here just sitting next to me, it wouldn't feel so unbearable. Her honesty tore at me. She wasn't trying to manipulate me. She wasn't trying to play a game. She was bearing the part of herself she hid from the world. And that made it even harder to resist. I get that, I said quietly. My voice sounded different, lower, heavier, almost unrecognizable. Sometimes silence is the loudest thing in the world. She turned then, finally meeting my eyes, and in that look, I saw it. The vulnerability, the longing, the desperation for connection. Before I knew what I was doing, my hand shifted slightly, just enough that my fingers brushed against hers again. This time, neither of us pulled away. Her lips parted like she was about to say something, but instead, she exhaled softly. Her shoulders relaxed, the tension in her frame easing as if that small touch had given her something she had been craving for too long. We stayed like that for a long while, hands barely touching, hearts pounding, words caught in the air between us. And that was when I realized the real danger of the night wasn't in what might happen. It was in what already had. Because once you cross that line, even with just a whisper, a touch, you can't go back to pretending it doesn't exist. The clock ticked past midnight. The room felt smaller, heavier, every second stretching out like an eternity. At one point, she rested her head lightly against my shoulder. My body went rigid, but I didn't move away. Her hair brushed my jaw. Her breath slow and steady against my neck. It was too much, too intimate, too real. My conscience screamed at me again. Leave. Walk out now before it's too late. But another voice, quieter, deeper, whispered something else. She needs you, and maybe you need her too. I don't know how long we stayed like that, but by the time I realized it, the night had already swallowed us whole. And the scariest part, I didn't want it to end. The longer I sat there, the harder it became to separate right from wrong. What started as silence between us had turned into something heavier, something almost alive, filling every corner of the room. Her head rested lightly on my shoulder, and though it seemed so innocent, it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. My body tensed under the closeness, but I didn't move. Couldn't. The truth was, it felt too natural, too necessary. She broke the silence first. Her voice was low, almost trembling, as if she were confessing to the air rather than to me. You know, people think I'm strong. They think I have everything figured out. But they don't see me when the house is this quiet. They don't know how loud it gets in here when no one's around. Her fingers, still close to mine, shifted slightly, grazing against my skin. It wasn't deliberate, at least not fully. It was hesitation mixed with yearning, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to want that small comfort. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. You don't have to be strong all the time, I said quietly. Nobody does. Her head tilted slightly against me, and I felt her exhale. I've been strong for so long. I don't even know what it feels like not to be until now. That last part hung in the air between us, heavier than anything else she had said. Until now, I should have pulled away. I should have stood up, created distance, given her the space she deserved. But instead, I let the words settle into me like they belonged there. Minutes stretched into hours. The house seemed to shrink around us. The ticking clock, a reminder that time was moving, even if we weren't. At some point, she shifted closer, the blanket around her slipping enough that I instinctively reached to adjust it. My hand brushed against her arm, her skin warm beneath my fingertips. She didn't flinch. She didn't move away. She only whispered, "Thank you." It was such a simple word, but the way she said it made my chest ache. As if no one had done something as small as pulling a blanket for her in far too long. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a long silence. "Yeah, why do you stay? I mean, even before tonight. You've always been around when you didn't have to be. Why?" Her question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought about it before. Not in words, at least. Why did I keep coming back? Why did I always find myself here lingering longer than I should? I hesitated, trying to find the right answer, but the truth slipped out before I could stop it. Because I feel like you need someone, and maybe I need that too. Her breath hitched softly. She turned her face toward me, eyes searching mine. For a moment, I thought she might say something, but instead, she just nodded, her lips pressing together like she was holding back everything she wanted to say. That's when I realized this wasn't just her loneliness binding us together. It was mine too. The night deepened, shadows stretching across the walls. Neither of us moved, as if standing up would break something fragile that couldn't be put back together. At one point, she laughed quietly, a sound so sudden it startled me. It wasn't forced. It was soft, genuine, almost shy. "Do you realize how crazy this is?" she asked. I gave a small smile, though my chest was tight. "Yeah, I do. And yet," she trailed off, shaking her head lightly, "it doesn't feel wrong. Not right now." Her honesty pierced through me because she was right. It should have felt wrong. But in that moment, sitting there in the quiet glow of the lamp, her warmth against me, it didn't. It felt inevitable. We started talking more then, voices low as if afraid the walls might hear us. She told me about her past, about choices she regretted, about nights she lay awake replaying them over and over. I listened, really listened, because every word felt like a gift she wasn't giving to anyone else. And when it was my turn, I found myself telling her things I had never spoken aloud. Fears I'd buried, doubts I'd hidden. She didn't judge. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, her presence steady and grounding. Somewhere in the middle of those confessions, her hand finally settled over mine. No hesitation this time, no pulling back. Her fingers intertwined with mine, and the weight of that simple gesture was heavier than anything I had ever felt. I looked down at our hands, then up at her. She didn't look away. The tension between us shifted, still unspoken, but undeniable. My chest tightened, my mind racing with the consequences, the risks, the questions of what would happen if we didn't stop. But neither of us moved. The night outside pressed deeper into silence. The world beyond those walls didn't exist anymore. It was just us, two people caught in something bigger than we were ready to admit. I don't know how long we stayed like that, but eventually, she whispered, "You don't have to go back tonight. You know, it's late. You can stay here. Just stay." Her words carried more weight than they should have. They weren't just about sleeping on a couch. They weren't about convenience. They were about choosing to cross a line with no way back. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came because deep down I already knew the answer. I sat there, her words echoing in my mind. Just stay. It sounded so simple, but it wasn't simple at all. Staying meant more than just passing the night under the same roof. It meant acknowledging something we both had been dancing around for far too long. My heart pounded so hard. I could feel it in my throat. I looked at her, really looked at her. The tired eyes, the quiet vulnerability. The way she was holding on to my hand like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "Are you sure?" I asked softly, my voice barely audible. She nodded, not letting go of me. "I've never been more sure of anything. I don't want to pretend anymore. Not tonight." Her honesty cut through me. For months, maybe longer, we had been walking a careful line, hiding behind casual words and stolen glances. And now she was stripping all of that away with one confession. I should have left. I knew that. I knew if I walked out the door right then, everything would remain intact, clean, safe. But I didn't want safe. Not anymore. The silence stretched. And then, without warning, she leaned in. Her forehead rested against mine. A gesture so gentle it broke something inside me. She didn't kiss me. She didn't have to. That small closeness carried more meaning than any words ever could. And in that fragile moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just staying because she asked me to. I was staying because I wanted to. Because somewhere along the way, she had become the one place I felt like I belonged. The clock on the wall ticked on, the sound almost deafening in the quiet room. She whispered again, softer. This time, her voice breaking like glass. "Don't leave me tonight, please." And that was it. The last barrier between us fell. I exhaled a long, trembling breath and nodded. "I'll stay." Her shoulders sagged in relief, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. Not the polite smile she showed the world. Not the guarded one she used to hide her pain. The smile was raw, real, and it was for me. We didn't need to say anything more. We just sat there holding on to each other, knowing the choice had been made. Tomorrow would come with its questions, its consequences, its complications. But tonight was ours. And as the night deepened and the world outside disappeared, I understood something I never had before. Sometimes the most dangerous choices aren't the ones that break us. They're the ones that make us feel alive.